Hey guys, what's up? It's Schla coming back to ya with another episode of Walks with Schla. And today, I didn't have anything to talk about actually, and I was gonna talk about I guess I was just gonna talk about myself in more of a reflective sense, but then now I have something to talk about. I'm just thinking about how my upbringing has shaped me, and there's, I don't know, like a lot. Honestly, the way you were raised, the way your parents treat you, and where you grow up, it really can't be said enough, like just how much of an influence that can have on a person's personality. I do think that's really most of it. Like I really do, but obviously, um I think it's still pretty difficult for us to calculate like the origin of, is it more about a person's personality as a person, or is it like I'm trying to, is it a person thing or is it an environment thing? Like there's always this nature versus nurture, and I don't know that we have a super clear answer about it. I think someday we might, because again, as more surveillance ramps up, we'll have like pretty accurate statistics about these things, and we'll start to uncover some answers, I think, in the next couple decades. But for the time being, you have to assume that it's a combination of both. But I skew towards nurture, being like one of the predominant. It's probably mostly nurture, but I still could put it more at like a 60-40. I mean, I don't know. The reason why it's hard to pinpoint is you don't see people from when they're like a baby. You know what I mean? You just don't. You don't really see like how a person is from birth, what they're exposed to. And that matters like a lot because, your most formative years are birth to 8. That's really when, and really like, I think immediately from birth is when, your brain, it's just soaking in information. That's like an example of something again where it's like I say that and I feel like somebody would just go, "Oh, well, how do you know it's birth to age 8?" Like that's basically, that's a good interjection is like a follow up to last episode. That's what it feels like when I'm trying to talk to someone. It's like I know something and I learned it, although I haven't double checked it. So honestly, maybe the literature is different now, but it's something I had learned a while back, the whole birth to age 8 thing. And I believe it because I mean, I hear it and it makes a lot of sense with, the other things I know about reality, right? But we've got into before the reason why some people question things is because if the median of their information is mostly wrong, then, or they don't really know that much, their ability to conjecture and guess about the nature of reality is going to be very limited. Right? Like you can't, I mean, if you don't have that much knowledge to work off of, your predictions and your guesses about other things within the world, they're just going to be pretty off. Like you're going to end up missing the mark. You have to have previous knowledge to really be able to connect the dots, and knowledge and comprehension, it's really like a compounding thing. I mean, once you understand in math, for example, once you're sufficient in addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication, that's as a core, you're already like pretty set if your brain is able to compute well. And everything else after that, it kind of stems on that, you know? So it's like when it comes to reality, learning to not only take data seriously, but then also interpret it properly is a very important combination. Sadly, most people, again, it's very trendy to just discount data and to just be like, oh, well, what good are the experts? They never, oh, look where we're at right now. Like, look at these experts. We're listening to the experts, and we were just talking about how that was kind of silly. But yeah, now I forget what I was talking about. That's kind of a shame. That always ends up happening. Like, I always end up getting down these other topics, and I kind of wish I had the live transcription here so I could just look through it. But we'll have to figure out like if I'm really trying to do that or not. I don't know, because I like this app, and there may be a better app. I'm not really sure. That also may drain the battery pretty substantially, and I don't really like things being inefficient. So, well, it's probably something I should look into or consider, though. I know we've talked about it before, but yeah. Where else am I at? What was I talking about? I was talking about people and their, oh yeah, nature versus nurture. And my honest opinion is it could be like a 60-40 or like a 70-30. That's my guess as to the nature versus nurture thing, because a lot of people, it's so hard to like look into all these like things and like how an environment shapes a person. It's very difficult to really calculate that, especially because, I mean, your personality really could be shaped, for all we know, it's like when you're a real baby, whatever you're exposed to when you're like super little, even just birth to 1 year old, birth to 2 years old. And it's kind of hard to prove like whether that was your core coming from your heart or whether it was the world around you. But I think that, but see, here's the problem though, because I say that I'm more of a believer in nurture than nature, but there is something very important to clarify. Like, nature gives you, there are two ceilings and floors. Um, Nurture is an unlimited ceiling. There's not really any limitation on potentially how well you can be raised, how good of an environment you can have, and there's also not really any floor. You could be raised in a horrible environment. So, like, the range, the effective spectrum that nurture rests on, it's much wider than nature. I think nature, yeah, I mean, you have some dumb people and you have some smart people, but it's going to be a little bit less wide of a spectrum. And the most important kind of next point is that you could give somebody with a poor nature a perfect nurture, and it would probably only reach a certain point. Because if there's something flawed in a person's nature, in a person's heart, their potential is only like, I feel like they may just start abusing things, past a certain point. And I think that's something important to think about, right? Because it's like, past a certain point, I don't really think that, like, if somebody's nature's bad, I mean, it's probably better for them to be in a good environment. But, you know, it's probably not going to really save them or anything like that. So, like a bad person, that's kind of how I feel about it. Like I think if a person's IQ as a baseline, for example, let's say their IQ baseline is 70, and they grow up in like a perfect household where they learn two or three instruments, they learn a bunch of languages, they study a lot because their parents have them structured. Their effective IQ could go up by like 20 or 30 points, right? But again, it's like if someone's IQ was 30, past a certain, like, you can't really, I mean, what good is nurture going to do? So nurture is secondary. That's like the most important thing. Nurture, it has to be interpreted as a secondary factor. Because you just can't, like, you can't say that nurture is the end all be all. You can't say that everything's nurture because that doesn't really seem to be the case in the real world. I wish they would do more extensive testing on this, but I guess they would consider it inhumane, but I think they could do it in a pretty humane way with adopted kids. And I am probably pretty curious to see if this has happened before. I will ask the AI because I think in that case it would be pretty humane, because all you would do is, let's say, like, a family has 6 children and then they end up putting like two or three up for adoption. You could probably track and see like the outcomes. But see, that's not really an apples to apples comparison because obviously there's a lot there. Like, there's also that if somebody's adopted, they're probably just at a disadvantage. There's a lot of like strangeness with that, and I'm sure there's ego and feeling, weird and awkward about things. Like, I don't really know. So I guess that isn't really a one-to-one comparison, and to do real testing to prove things would be wildly inhumane. But I wouldn't be surprised if eventually we started to see more inhumane and revealing testing. Again, I mean, once you get to a point, if you have like a surveillance state, you're basically, I mean, everybody's going to be a part of a test. You know what I mean? Like, that's eventually going to be normal. The data is going to be tracked, and that's kind of it. Like, I don't know. That's just how it's going to be. Um, yeah, I don't really think I have much else to say about that. And I was saying how it was comical because in America it's all about like freedom, and when I've talked to GPT about it before, this was a while ago though. I think this was back in GPT-4. It was saying like it's not really likely for America to have the same types of restrictions as you would see in China, for example, because just there's like philosophical differences in how like a Western government, obviously in the West, I mean, freedom is more of a core belief, even though it's seeming inevitable that it has to vanish as we're seeing how low humanity can go within an artificial environment. There's gonna have to be at some point, like I said, well, let me say it a little, I think there will probably be a reckoning at some point for a semi-seizure of autonomy. I'm going to use more gentle words because before I'm saying like there's gonna be, and of course, like, I don't know that, but I think there will probably be a semi-seizure of autonomy. I am a pretty big believer in that, and it is truthfully the next step forward for humanity. It's again a semi-seizure, not a full-blown seizure, because nobody would accept that, but it would be some kind of a semi-seizure, and I think that's going to happen, of human autonomy, where we keep the individual human color and our personalities, we keep them intact. However, yeah, we keep those things intact, but I'm trying to think. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. Okay, sorry, yeah. I was just, and there's been a lot on my mind. I've been dealing with a lot, obviously. So it's kind of hard to do the show, but I'm really trying to fight through it. So there's been, if we eliminate all the exclusively negative traits about humanity, it should broaden up the potential for more interesting and intricate individuality. Like in my example, in my own, well, see, it's tricky because struggle and suffering does cause a certain personality, and my personality would be fundamentally different under what I'm outlining. It would be, and that is true, and I guess it's something to keep in mind, but it would probably be for the better, and I wouldn't have to be making the same criticism. Like my criticisms would likely be at a higher level, right? Because a lot of the insight I'm getting, it's based on the fact that society is yeah, it's based on the fact that like I witnessed and saw all the flaws that I saw. So if I was born into the system where like I wasn't neglected, it's possible that my brain power would just be utilized for like whatever that next problem for like the next step for humanity would, you know what I'm saying? I mean, usually it wouldn't just get to a point where it's just the end of the rope. I mean, I don't know. Or maybe it would just be the end of the rope and I would just excel better in the future because those updates or safeguards would be put into place. You know, there's like that as well. That's possible because that's already kind of what I believe. Like, I think if I was born um, maybe like 50 or 100 years from now, like maybe I'd fit in better. I don't really know, but it's like right now we're in such an awkward time. But I think I was born now to navigate that because it's clear that like there was a purpose to my birth and the timing of it because nobody else can really navigate things very well. And I mean, there's a lot of things I don't really have a clear, straightforward answer about, but there's actually a lot of things I do, and there's a lot of answers I think that we can get as a humanity. Like we're not gonna be able to figure out everything, Like that's not a realistic expectation, but I do think for the most part there are that we can figure out a lot. Humanity already has. Nowadays we've obviously learned so much more about ourselves and the world than I think any human ever thought we would have been capable of doing. So to think that like there's no purpose to figuring out stuff, I mean, come on, right? But I don't know. I mean, at the same time, maybe a lot of the dialogues and topics I'm bringing up, they probably already have been thought about. I think a lot of times it's the way a person says something that might matter. And I don't even know if I'm that great at saying things. So, I guess you can make the argument like I'm still just a drop in the bucket. But we don't really know yet. I'm still far from like my peak as like a person, it would probably be in like 5 years or maybe even 10 years. Like, I don't know, before you could really start to judge or give like a verdict on my communication skills. Because that's really something that you build, you know, and obviously, even now, if I look at myself 5 years ago, I was not like, I was just like a mess 5 years ago. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint that kind of stuff, in terms of if I actually end up making any significant contributions to philosophy, or if I'm just kind of saying things that somebody else already figured out and said in a better way. But I just mean this all to say that I think people like me are like, we're really needed in humanity and in the future and in the present as well. We really needed people like me in the past. But I honestly don't think the world was ready for people like me in the past. I think I would have just been, because that's kind of the problem. Like, the past, I honestly think in some ways was more arrogant, you know? I mean, people nowadays, I would say, are more arrogant, but I think people, maybe there's more nuance to people. Maybe there's a little bit more, like, because you have niche groups and you have lots of different groups, some different ideas end up emerging, you know? It's just like, yeah, there's like a different, there might be a wider scope of potential nowadays, for all I know. And so, yeah, I think it's all important. I think it's all important. But yeah, there could definitely be some kind of a wider scope to analyze and look at, and that's kind of why I think a lot of nerdier ideas, like, they function better in a tech based world. I mean, pre-tech, I would have been saying all the right stuff, but you know, I wouldn't be able to record it. I wouldn't be able to record it very easily. I guess I would have had to write it down, because I don't, nobody just had access to microphones or things like that. You see what I mean? Like, my, where I'm at, it really fits so well with where I'm at, timeline wise. Even though it's kind of rough, there's probably a purpose to that. That, like, that's what I'm going through. Well, I don't really know where I was getting. As you guys could tell, I kind of started trailing off towards the end here, but that episode went by pretty fast, so I guess it was good. I didn't really feel like it was that great, but I thought it was okay. I thought that was an okay episode. But anyways, it's been Schla, and now it's time to buy Schla. So, see you, Schla.